Greetings, Guardians. This is Olympus Alliance. And today we continue our journey through the Progress Faction Talisman series as we move toward one of the most explosive and underrated damage dealers inside the Engineer faction. Daredevil. Now Guardians. This is actually a very interesting hero to discuss because despite being around for a very long time, Daredevil is still one of those heroes that many players either completely ignore, or simply do not understand how to optimize correctly. And the funny thing is, if you let her attack free from the backline for too long, she can absolutely destroy teams in seconds. This is a hero built for chaos. A hero built for pressure. A hero built to turn bullets into executions. And that is exactly why talisman choice matters so much for her, because unlike some heroes where one talisman is obviously superior immediately, Daredevil actually creates a much more situational discussion depending on the type of frontline standing in front of her. So before we begin, Guardians, remember one important detail that we always follow during this series. Whenever we mention talisman stats, we always say the fixed stat first and the re-rollable stat second, because that second stat is where your optimization and adaptation truly begins. And adaptation is the entire point of talismans. Everything else in your account becomes mostly locked once upgraded. Glyphs stay there. Artifacts stay there. Skins stay there. But talismans? Talismans allow you to adjust your hero depending on the fight in front of you. And sometimes, that changes everything. So let's move directly into Daredevil and her first talisman, the Talisman of Recklessness. This talisman originally arrived during the first Talisman Fever events and comes with agility as the fixed main stat, and armor penetration as the re-rollable secondary stat. And immediately, this feels extremely natural for Daredevil. Agility brings physical attack, survivability, and additional stat scaling, while armor penetration allows her bullets to hit harder against defensive targets. And for a hero whose entire purpose is dealing damage from the backline, that combination immediately looks very attractive. But now we move toward her second talisman, the Talisman of Ardor. And this is where things become more interesting, because the Talisman of Ardor comes with armor penetration as the fixed main stat, physical attack as the re-rollable secondary stat. So now suddenly both talismans are bringing offensive value to Daredevil, just in different ways. One pushes raw offensive scaling harder. The other sacrifices some damage in exchange for stronger penetration and additional survivability. So now the question becomes, which one is actually better? And like always, Guardians, we answer that question by looking at two things. The first is skill scaling. The second is battlefield role. When we look at Daredevil's skills, it becomes very obvious very quickly that physical attack is massively important for her overall performance. Multiple skills scale directly from physical attack, meaning the higher her offensive stats climb, the harder she punishes enemies across the battlefield. And this immediately gives the Talisman of Recklessness a major advantage, because it simply provides far more overall physical attack than the second talisman. That difference is enormous. And when you think about what Daredevil actually wants to do, it makes perfect sense. She wants to shoot harder, kill faster, and overwhelm enemies before they stabilize. So from a pure offensive perspective, Recklessness clearly wins the first round. But now we move toward the second factor. What is Daredevil's actual role inside a team? And Guardians, Daredevil exists for one reason. Damage? Pure aggression. She is not a support hero. She is not controlling the battlefield. She is there to make the enemy pay in blood before they ever reach your backline. And because of that, Both physical attack and armor penetration become extremely valuable stats depending on the type of fight you are entering. Now imagine you are facing a softer defensive structure. No massive tank. No gigantic armor wall protecting the enemy team. In that situation, extra armor penetration may not actually be necessary because Daredevil is already capable of shredding targets quickly. And that is exactly where the Talisman of Ardor becomes terrifying. The additional physical attack scaling allows her to maximize body count extremely fast. Her bullets hit harder, her skills scale better, and her overall battlefield pressure becomes much more explosive. But now let's change the battlefield completely. Massive frontline tanks. Heavy armor. Defensive walls trying to protect fragile backline carries. Suddenly things become different. Because now raw physical attack alone may not be enough to break through efficiently. And this is where the Talisman of Recklessness starts becoming extremely interesting. The additional armor penetration allows Daredevil to punch through tankier front lines far more effectively, making her damage more consistent against heavily protected teams. And while you lose some raw physical attack compared to Talisman of Ardor, you gain stronger penetration value and additional agility, which slightly improves her survivability during longer fights. So Guardians. This becomes one of those situations where the answer is genuinely situational. Against weaker or softer lines, Talisman of Ardor will often feel superior because the additional offensive scaling allows Daredevil to completely overwhelm enemies before the fight stabilizes. But against heavily armored defensive structures, Talisman of Recklessness may absolutely help her perform more effectively by breaking through those front lines faster and keeping her pressure relevant longer into the fight. And this is why training matters so much. Because no spreadsheet will ever replace actual battlefield experience. You need to test. You need to see how Daredevil behaves against different defensive structures. You need to understand when raw offensive scaling is enough. And when additional penetration becomes necessary. That is the difference between simply copying builds and truly understanding a hero. Now there is also another important detail here, Guardians. Accessibility. Because the Talisman of Recklessness is available inside the Eternal Frontier Merchant for 700,000 coins whenever it rotates back into the shop. And that is fantastic value. Especially because the second talisman is significantly harder and more expensive to obtain overall. So for many players, especially free-to-play and medium-spending accounts, Recklessness becomes an incredibly attractive option simply because of how efficient it is to acquire compared to the value it provides. And honestly, Guardians, Daredevil is one of those heroes that becomes surprisingly fun once you start understanding her dynamics correctly. She may not dominate the current meta like some magical monsters running around the battlefield right now. But under the correct conditions she can absolutely erase teams before they even react. And that makes her dangerous. So overall, Guardians, from our perspective, Talisman of Ardor feels like the stronger universal option because of the massive physical attack scaling and overall flexibility it gives Daredevil offensively. But the Talisman of Recklessness absolutely has its place against tankier frontline structures where additional armor penetration can dramatically improve her effectiveness. So now, Guardians, we want to hear from you. Which talisman do you prefer on Daredevil? Have you tested both? Did one perform better for your account and your matchups? Let us know below because these discussions always help everyone understand the battlefield better. And of course, tell us which progress hero you want us to cover next in this Talisman series because the engineers still have many dangerous heroes waiting for discussion. Stay tuned, stay sharp. And as always, salute and friendship.